In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court has struck down the steel and aluminum tariffs from the Trump era, fundamentally reshaping the direction of U.S. trade policy and signaling the end of a controversial chapter in American economic history. This decision marks a significant shift away from the recent wave of protectionism, directly challenging the use of national security as a broad justification for imposing tariffs on foreign goods. For years, these tariffs were defended as necessary for safeguarding American industries, but critics argued they were a cover for economic nationalism. The tariffs, a hallmark of the previous administration, imposed steep taxes on imported steel and aluminum, sparking global trade tensions and retaliatory measures from key trading partners. These policies disrupted international supply chains and led to higher costs for American manufacturers and consumers alike. The Supreme Court's ruling brings an end to a lengthy and complex legal battle, clarifying the constitutional limits of presidential power in trade matters and reinforcing the system of checks and balances at the heart of U.S. governance. It signals a return to a more traditional, Congress-led approach to trade, where elected representatives play a central role in shaping the nation's economic relationships with the world. For businesses that rely on global supply chains, this decision may bring much-needed relief from the high costs and uncertainty caused by the tariffs. Companies can now plan with greater confidence, knowing that sudden policy shifts are less likely. At the same time, international partners have an opportunity to mend strained trade relations with the United States, opening the door for renewed cooperation and the negotiation of fairer, more stable trade agreements. This decision concludes a complex legal journey that has spanned several years, setting a new and clearer standard for how national security can be invoked in trade policy. It sends a message that such justifications must be carefully scrutinized and not used as a blanket excuse for economic protectionism. Domestic manufacturers and international allies now face a new economic reality, one that emphasizes collaboration, transparency, and adherence to established legal frameworks. The ripple effects of this ruling will be felt across industries and borders. The court's action opens a new chapter in American economic policy, encouraging lawmakers and business leaders to rethink strategies for competing in a rapidly changing global marketplace. The ruling offers much-needed clarity, establishing a new legal standard for when and how national security can be cited in trade decisions, and providing guidance for future administrations. This pivotal moment redefines the landscape of global commerce, setting the stage for a more open, predictable, and cooperative era in international trade. The Supreme Court critiqued the executive's use of Section 232, narrowing the scope of national security. The justices emphasized Congress's role in regulating foreign commerce, curbing executive overreach. The ruling clarifies that presidential discretion in trade is not absolute. The court noted the tariff's indefinite nature was inconsistent with the statute's emergency purpose. Future use of Section 232 must be targeted and time-limited. This decision sets a precedent, requiring future presidents to collaborate with Congress on trade policies. The ruling underscores that national security cannot be a blanket justification for bypassing legislative processes. It reaffirms the constitutional framework dividing government responsibilities. The Supreme Court's landmark decision to remove tariffs on imported steel and aluminum is set to send shockwaves throughout the U.S. economy, creating a complex web of winners and losers across various sectors. This move marks a significant shift in trade policy, and its effects will ripple far beyond the courtroom, touching businesses both large and small. Industries such as automotive manufacturing and construction, which are among the largest consumers of steel and aluminum, are welcoming the relief from previously high input costs. For these sectors, the removal of tariffs means lower expenses for raw materials, which can translate into more affordable products for consumers and increased profit margins for companies. With access to materials at globally competitive prices, these industries are poised to boost their competitiveness, expand production, and potentially create new jobs. The ability to source cheaper materials may also encourage investment in new projects and infrastructure. However, for domestic steel and aluminum producers, the removal of tariffs presents significant challenges. Without the protective shield of tariffs, these companies now face increased competition from foreign imports, which could threaten jobs and even lead to plant closures if they cannot adapt quickly. To survive and thrive, Domestic producers must innovate, invest in advanced technologies, or seek new efficiencies to remain competitive. This could mean adopting automation, improving product quality, or finding niche markets where they can excel. Small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs, stand to benefit from reduced material costs as well. With lower expenses, these businesses may have more capital to invest in growth, hire additional staff, or expand their product lines, strengthening the backbone of the American economy. Overall, the decision is shifting the business landscape toward a more market-driven environment, where success is determined by efficiency, innovation, and adaptability rather than government protection. Many economists believe that this move will ultimately lead to greater efficiency and long-term economic growth, as resources are allocated to the most productive uses and companies are incentivized to improve. Companies across all sectors must now adapt to a new era of global competition, focusing on innovation, quality, and customer value to succeed in the open market. By removing government intervention, the ruling encourages a more efficient allocation of resources, allowing market forces to determine winners and losers. While the transition may be difficult for industries that have long relied on protection, it also promises the potential for a more dynamic and resilient economy in the long run. Ultimately, the focus returns to the core factors of market-driven success: innovation, efficiency, and the ability to adapt to changing global conditions. The recent ruling is expected to bring much-needed financial relief to consumers across the country, as production costs for many everyday goods are projected to decline. This change could make a real difference for families and individuals who have been feeling the pinch of higher prices at the checkout. Previously, tariffs had driven up the prices of essential items like cars, refrigerators, washing machines, and other appliances, making them less affordable for many households. Shoppers often found themselves paying more for the same products, straining their budgets. Now, with these tariffs removed, manufacturers can source materials at lower costs, which should lead to a drop in production expenses. This, in turn, is expected to ease inflationary pressures and boost consumers' purchasing power, allowing people to get more value for their money. Financial markets responded quickly and positively. Stock prices surged for companies that rely heavily on steel and aluminum, such as automakers and appliance manufacturers, as investors anticipated improved profitability. Investors are optimistic that lower input costs will translate into higher earnings and stronger profit margins for these companies, potentially leading to increased dividends and shareholder value. However, not everyone benefited. Domestic steel and aluminum producers saw their stock values decline, as the removal of tariffs means they now face renewed competition from international suppliers, raising concerns about future profits and job security. The market's reaction highlights the dual impact of the ruling. While some sectors stand to gain, others must adapt to a more competitive environment. Overall, most investors view the decision as a positive step for the broader U.S. economy, expecting it to stimulate growth, encourage investment, and create new opportunities. Economists will be closely monitoring how quickly these cost savings are passed on to consumers, and whether lower prices will spur increased spending and economic activity. In the long run, the ruling is expected to contribute to a healthier, more dynamic economic climate, supporting job creation and innovation. By removing trade barriers, the decision not only supports sustainable growth, but also strengthens the nation's position in the global marketplace, paving the way for future prosperity. The international community, especially U.S. allies, welcomes the Supreme Court's decision. Countries like Canada and the EU viewed the tariffs as violations of trade norms. The ruling de-escalates tensions, restoring a rules-based trading system. Leaders see it as a sign of America's renewed commitment to multilateralism. Several countries plan to lift retaliatory tariffs, benefiting U.S. exporters. The decision boosts American exports and supports jobs in export-dependent industries. It removes a major source of global economic instability. The shift away from protectionism fosters international cooperation and shared prosperity. The Biden administration welcomes the ruling, aligning with its trade strategy. The decision removes a diplomatic obstacle, allowing for alliance rebuilding. The focus shifts to targeted tools addressing issues like intellectual property theft. The administration aims to finalize the removal of retaliatory tariffs. New trade agreements will address digital trade and supply chain resilience. The ruling provides a clean slate for redefining American trade leadership. The strategy balances protecting American jobs and reassuring international partners. The collaborative approach aims to build a resilient global economic system. The ruling reignites trade policy debates in Washington, sharpening political divides. Democrats see it as a correction, curbing executive overreach and supporting workers. Republicans are split, with traditional free traders welcoming the decision. The populist wing criticizes it, viewing tariffs as vital for defending industries. The decision impacts political campaigns and legislative agendas. Congress may amend trade laws to prevent future executive overreach. Trade policy remains a contentious battleground, influencing U.S. economic policy. The court shifts the debate from the executive to the legislative arena. The ruling narrows executive power, reinforcing Congress's role in trade. It sets a precedent limiting unilateral tariff imposition by future presidents. The decision may influence judicial interpretations of other executive powers. Lawmakers may draft legislation with clearer limits on executive authority. The ruling reshapes strategic calculations for future administrations. It promotes a collaborative policymaking process between branches. The decision reaffirms the rule of law and constitutional governance. It prevents abrupt policy swings, grounding trade strategy in shared authority. The Supreme Court's decision marks a watershed moment for U.S. trade policy. It ends a protectionist chapter, setting a new course for global engagement. The ruling offers relief to industries and consumers, challenging domestic producers. International allies welcome the decision, supporting a collaborative trade agenda. Politically, it intensifies trade debates, ensuring the issue remains central. The ruling limits unilateral presidential action, reinforcing separation of powers. It recalibrates trade policy, moving power back to Congress. The decision encourages a strategic, legally sound approach to trade. The court raises a fundamental question: how will the U.S. ensure prosperity in global competition? As trade wars end, new strategies must emerge for economic success.